Welcome to the Holistic Success Show. I'm Elizabeth Lozano.
And I'm Dr. Robert Puff. Today we're going to have a guest talk about self-doubt and how it can negatively affect relationships.
We'll also be watching clips from Dr. Puff about how you can be happy regardless of your circumstances.
And one questioner asked, what do I do with self-doubt?
And then we'll be answering another viewer's question about how to not let anxiety get the better of you.
Thank you and welcome to our show.
Thank you.
Today I want to talk about happiness and the law of science. What do I mean by that? In science there's a rule. The rule says if there's an example of it somewhere, anywhere in the universe, then that means it can happen. And so, applied to happiness, if there's someone on the planet who is happy, who's enjoying their life, and life is going well for them, and yet they have tragedy, that means that's a possibility. You can actually have bad things happen to you and still be happy. And as a way of exemplifying that, I want to share two stories of women that I've known in my life. They were my teachers who really helped me grow and learn in life. And they were women, they passed now, they're both gone, but they were wonderful ladies. And let me start with the first one being Verna. Many years ago, I met this wonderful woman, very positive, very upbeat, just reaching out to everyone that she could reach out to, including me. And we once a week would get together for breakfast, and it was just a really wonderful experience. I think we met for several years. And I always looked forward to my Monday breakfasts with Verna. And let me just tell you her story. She had almost died. She had a son who was dead. She had a grandson who was a drug addict. And her husband had died. And she was alone in the world. She had some distant relatives that came once in a while, but mostly she was alone in the world. And yet, with all these health problems and no one left there, she was in a nursing home. And even in that nursing home, most of us would think, a nursing home, what a terrible place to go. And she did not see it that way. She said, I'm there. God kept me here to reach out to the people here. And that's what she did. She would go around just being very positive, very loving. I mean, everyone loved her there. And she was just one of the most wonderful persons I've ever met in my life. Because even though I doubt there's a viewer out there that would trade places with her, she found her life to be replete with joy, happiness, and a lot of that came from her loving others. I mean, everyone really loved this woman because she was so positive, even though she had all that tragedy. And getting back to my original premise of, if science says someone on the planet can do this, then that's a possibility. Whatever you are struggling with, if it isn't as bad as Verna, then that means we too can be happy right now. The second story is of Betty. Different story, but another wonderful lady. What had happened to her, she had almost died when she was 30. She actually did die, and they resuscitated her. When she came back, she had more health problems than you can imagine. I mean, she for the rest of her life, she was basically had to have a cane to get around, and she died at 60. She lived about 30 years, but she looked much older than that. But again, one of the most magical, wonderful women that I ever met in my life. And in her case, she had a very mystical experience when she died. And so when she would meditate, so often those mystical experiences came back to her, and she would just see the joy and beauty in everything, and she would have the most magical experiences because we meditated together, her and I, and a small group would get together and meditate. That's how I get to really know her heart. And even though she had one son who lived in another country, and she had no one else, she reached out. She was very actively involved in a church, helping out there, volunteering. And she just loved people around her. But I think in her instance, what was most magical was how in much depth, I mean, really, she was, having mystical experience, it's very ecstatic, euphoric experiences over and over again, very easily, even though she had countless health problems that were actually causing her pain. So she had so much pain, and yet she had so much ecstatic bliss at the same time. And so as I'm saying that, if some of you are out there listening or know someone that you love, that if they are suffering, or if you're suffering, or if I'm suffering, we can still, even in that suffering, find joy, find peace and find ecstatic bliss. And since science says that is an option, as long as one person out of the 7 billion on the planet can do that, that means it's an option. Let us together work towards, no matter what life throws us, let us together work towards always finding the beauty, even in the pain. Peace.
Our first question comes to us from Laura, who's from San Diego, California. And she asks, how can you overcome self-doubt and fear to start a new career on the right path of positive thinking and self-assurance? Are there any daily meditations or thought exercises?
Good question, of course. And a lot of people are struggling with that right now. The thing you have to think about is, first, what are you thinking? What's going on inside of here? If there's negative talk and you're not aware of it, it will create affect. It will affect you, it will affect the people around you, and you may have a much more difficult time getting a job. But if you're aware of it, you can change it. So awareness is always the pivotal thing to use in your growth. What am I doing? Okay. Now that you're aware of what you're doing, and you say, I'm starting to think negatively about finding this job. What do? You basically just change your thought. You don't criticize yourself. You don't try to suppress it. You just basically, it's kind of like I'm looking at you and I look over here. That thought comes there and you switch your thoughts over here. Switch it to something positive. Saying, there's a lot of jobs out there and I'm going to get one because I'm good at what I do. It's really, the daily meditation, I think what's helpful there is just focusing on what you want, not what you're afraid of losing. Because if you focus on what you're afraid of losing, that will kind of become your reality. But if you focus on what you want and really visualize that and just feel that coming, that will be the reality that will be much more likely to be created, don't you think?
I do, absolutely. And I think another good thing that you can do to help, and this might sound kind of funny, but I've actually done this and I recommend people to do this, is that if you're having a hard time and you're struggling with kind of that negative self-talk, you can use like an eyeliner like pencil, or you can use, an erasable marker and write on your mirror, like when you're getting ready in the morning, write on your mirror like positive attributes about yourself, things that you know that you're good at. I'm a confident person. I'm good at, even if it has to come down, I'm good at filing things. I'm good at stuffing envelope, whatever. But hopefully, you can get to the point where you can expand upon that and realize those positive assets that you have, because I'm sure you do have them. You just got to look deep. And when you're having a hard time, you look at those. And every morning, even if you're not having a hard time, you look at those so you can go throughout the day and know and have confidence in yourself that you can do it and that you have wonderful, wonderful aspects about yourself.
And one last thing, if I may suggest, is get a support group that really supports you, people around you that are encouraging to you, loving you. And if they're not doing that, they really shouldn't be in your life that much. So have people around you also being positive, being supportive, and I think you'll find that finding that new job will be much more easy.
We wish you the best of luck and thank you so much for your questions.
Thank you.
I'd like to welcome this week's guest to the show, Dr. Robert Jameson. He is a licensed marriage and family therapist and the author of many books, one of which we're going to talk about here today on the show, which is The Keys to Joy-Filled Living. So welcome, Dr. Jameson.
Well, thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit about this book that you've created?
Well, it came from actually doing therapy for about 25 years or so. And when I was doing therapy, we'd talk about different subjects, and the clients would go out and they kind of forgot what we talked about. So I began writing up little handouts for them to kind of refresh their memory about what do I do or how do I manage my depression or my anxiety. And so through the years, I had probably about a whole file full of these little handouts. And my clients would, when they get in trouble, they go back and reread those. And then somewhere and they say, you got to write a book. This is good stuff. So after much encouragement and thought, I went ahead and wrote The Keys to Joy-Filled Living.
Okay. So what are some of the keys to joy-filled living? What would you say that is? Because I think that that's pretty important, for people to hear.
Well, there's a lot of ways of, when I talk about joy, and for my mind, joy is one of those little things that kind of percolates in our heart. So I could actually be going through some challenging times, but still experiencing that joy that's still going on inside. So how do you create joy I think was your question. And so there's several ways, and there's probably many, many ways, but part of one thing that joy comes if we are in nature, and we're out in nature and we look at the sunset or look at the trees or the ocean, and we say, there's a sense of peace that's tends to show up inside of ourselves. Another thing that creates joy very quickly is babies. I mean, hang around babies. Let people do just what you did. They go, oh, wow, And so we do. We giggle and we do all kinds of interesting things with babies, which is quite precious. Another thing that creates joy is music. And there's different kinds of music. And so finding out what kind of music gives you joy. So some music, of course, the blues or whatever makes us kind of go into another place. But some music is very uplifting and joyful.
And that can be both. It's interesting because that can be both music with words, but also music that's just instrumental.
Absolutely, absolutely. And sometimes the instrumental stuff, some of the old classical stuff, because it doesn't have words that are programming our unconscious, brings it that place of more peace and joy. In fact, just that reminds me of once I was with my brother and he was feeling so terrible. And his name is Jerry. He said, Jerry, what kind of music are you listening to? I said, I love country western music. And my baby's done died and I'm lonely. And so I began to have him listen to what you're listening to because, music does program us in many ways. So anyway, that's a sidetrack.
Well, it's actually interesting because Dr. Robert Puff and myself, who is the co-host of the show, we wrote a book together called Living a Positive Life. So it teaches people how to be positive. And one of the things that, we talk about in there is the importance of music and how the words really affect, what's going on in here.
Very, very much
what's
so.
going on in here.
Yes, very, very much so. And so listening to some music that is positive certainly will bring that joy up in our hearts. Another thing, by the way, that brings joy is just touching our heart. It's just an interesting, very thing. You often see people on TV and they have an emotion, they'll just automatically just touch their heart. Or even when people pray, they often will put their, so just touching your heart brings us that place of peace or joy inside. So those are some kind of quick things that will bring us into a joy.
But I think important to note because, so often people forget to do those things, those little things that really make a difference, when you're having a hard time.
Yes.
Because no matter what you're going through, and I think that this is the message that you're trying to say, no matter what you're going through, you can find joy, you can find those moments of happiness and of peace in your life.
Yes, absolutely. It's kind of the thing, there's the statement that goes, it's not the issue, that's the issue. It's how you deal with the issue, that's the issue. So as we go through our lives, there's always going to be things that challenge us. In some ways that's good because that's when we grow. So when I go through something that's challenging me, I'm going to say, oh no, or I can say, oh boy. It really is a choice point there, by the way. So part of with the joy spot, what I'd ask people to do is be observant, start to watch when do you have that moment of joy. And when you have that moment of joy, just take a note of that. What was that? And then we can continuously, consciously choose into that moment. Joy is always present.
I like that. That's true. Now, what about negative thoughts? Because I know negative thoughts definitely affect people, affect how they're feeling, affect everything. How can people change their negative thinking? What are some things that you recommend for that?
Well, that's a really big one. In fact, I call it negative self-talk or just self-talk. And the first step to change anything really is a point of awareness. So I can't change anything until I'm aware. So unfortunately, usually if I say, well, I'm not going to be negative anymore. So here comes a negative thought. Maybe I'm judging myself or someone else. So I say, stop that. Don't do that anymore. So unfortunately, that's the wrong approach.
You're abusing yourself for...
Not only, yes, exactly. Not only am I abusing it, but it drops from the conscious level to the unconscious level.
Okay. Because you don't really think about why you're thinking about it, or you don't say, okay, I'm having this thought.
Absolutely. So I need to be aware in order to change that negative thought. So if I say, well, thank you for letting me be aware of that negative thought, that sends a little message to maybe my inner child or basic self that says, oh, you want to be aware when you're thinking negative thoughts? Absolutely. So it sends that message up. Oh, there it is. There it is. So really it's kind of like a popcorn effect. You start to see these little negative thoughts all over the place, which is wonderful because every time you see that, that's an opportunity for change. Once we're at that, then we can do another thing. Maybe we can acknowledge ourselves for that. Thank you for letting me see that. And then we can maybe forgive ourselves for that, for having the judgment. And then we do the next step would be, I have them say an affirmation. It goes like this: next time I'll do better. Meaning I've been doing this for 20, 30, 40, 50, how many years. I'm probably not going to stop doing this negative worrying pattern tomorrow. So Next time, that's programming. The next time that shows up, I'll do better. I'll do better. There's a powerful statement. We usually hear the last 2 or 3 words that we utter. For example, if I say, don't think of your necklace, don't think of your shoes.
That's the thing you think of.
Exactly. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So as a parent who says, don't drop that glass, drop that glass. Don't do that, do that. Don't think of those thoughts, think of those thoughts. So that's how we're programmed. It's amazing. So what we're saying is next time I'll do better, do better. So in that sense, right? Do better. So that's where we're programming. Then if I was to do better, what would that look like? What would I be saying to myself? What would I be doing differently? So I might come with a bunch of things, doing some brainstorming, and then I might do one or all the things that show up. So that would be the kind of the process. Thank you. I forgive myself. Next time I'll do better.
And I think that's a really important message for our viewers to take in, because it's a matter of, it sounds like it's really important to be gentle with yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I think that self-critical talk, I mean, because that can even come in when you're trying to get rid of the negative self-talk, like, oh, there I go again with the negative self-talk, and that is just a repetitive cycle.
Absolutely, and that feeds on it, and that's why I say it's not the issue, it's how you deal with the issue. It's not that I have negative self-talks, it's how I work with my negative self-talk. It's not that I judge myself or others, it's how I work with myself as I'm judging myself or others. That really is the key, and that's the wonderful turning point.
Oh, that's some really great advice. I know that in a lot of the work that I do with people, I talk about, the importance of how they feel about themselves and how that affects relationships. Why don't you talk a little bit about kind of how a person's, self-image or whatever, how that affects their relationships and how to have a healthy relationship?
Well, that's a beautiful question. It's kind of one of those things. Unfortunately, we're not taught how to have a healthy relationship in high school. I wish we were.
And we aren't always modeled that from our parents either, unfortunately.
Exactly. And so what we do is often model what our parents taught us in our relationship. So let me just say the way we fall in love, from my perspective. As a man, I look at this woman and say, oh God, she's so beautiful. Look at her eyes, she's gorgeous. I love her. So my self-talk is programming me to fall in love with her. And I do. After a period of time, I start saying, oh, I can't believe she's doing that again. How many times? Oh, I hate her. Then I program the computer to fall out of love with her. So in a long-term healthy relationship, I have to continuously, consciously choose to fall in love with my partner. I have to focus on those things that I love about her.
Yeah, actually I can remember being in graduate school and one of my professors had said that when he works with couples, and I've actually done this with my work with couples, is it's a vitamin a day. You give each other something positive a day. You tell each other something to acknowledge, something nice, because so many people, it turns to the negative.
Absolutely, and that's where we don't appreciate each other. And a lot of times working with couples, what they do is that both sides feel unappreciated, and they're doing a lot to make the other person feel that they are loved. But if it's not on the level that they hear, they don't feel appreciated. And I agree. One thing that I have couples do is give maybe 5 appreciation statements a day. And it might be from, I appreciate you brush your teeth this morning, to those little basic things that are important, to, I just appreciate that you're here in my life.
Yeah.
So watching how continuously focusing on what we say, giving those positive words of appreciation is another major step in terms of that.
So, and I'm sure you have a lot of that in a lot of the books that you have written.
Yes.
So why don't we talk about now how somebody can get a hold of you, how they can purchase this book, and you also have brought along with you a CD. So if you can talk about that, I think it would be really great.
Okay, wonderful. Well, you can get my book out on my website. It's from the title, The Keys to JoyFilledLiving.com. That's one spot. You can get it on Amazon, of course, and a lot of the bookstores across the country also have it. Those are probably the 2 primary places, or 3 primary places. The CD, the Naihu, Empathy with God, is what it is an hour-long musical with people singing and singing basically that sound, Naihu, which means empathy with God. And it's really designed to help people drop down and be more relaxed. And people who can't sleep, it's perfect for those kinds of situations. Or people doing massage or body work, it's amazing for that. Or just playing it if there's some disturbance in the house. People say, oh, I'll put that CD on, and all of a sudden, wow, we're feeling peaceful here. Isn't this wonderful? Or even in offices. So that's part of the reason why I created that too.
Well, I'm so excited to listen to it. And thank you so much for being a guest on our show.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
One of my main arguments that I make is that anyone, anywhere, no matter what circumstances they are in, can be happy. And I want to give a story that occurred to me many, many years ago. I was visiting Egypt with a couple friends of mine. We were on a cross-cultural kind of trip learning about the Middle East. And one of the countries that I visited was Egypt. When I was there, we went to visit garbage collectors of Egypt. It's kind of like a caste system within Egypt. And they lived basically in the garbage. If I can describe it, they built their homes out of metal planks, metal pieces, and their garbage was all around them, and it was like a caste system. They were the people that collected garbage in Egypt, and they went around collecting it all over the city. And so it was a very, very impoverished place, as you can imagine, because they lived with the garbage. And when we visited there, we spent the day there, and I spent some time with a family for about a day. And they had, this one family it was a man and a wife, and they had 10 children. And I was talking to them, observing them. And their home was about the size of what we would consider in the United States as a studio apartment. So very small, probably like 600 square feet. Very small. Or if you met in another country, about the size of what was one bedroom, very small apartment. Smaller than one bedroom, just a studio apartment. Think of a one room, and that was their place. And I remember going in there, and it was like, the smells were very strong. It was dirty, and yet, this family, now I'm sure not everyone there was this way, but this couple, they were very actually happy. They were very gracious, they were very giving. They reached out to me, they asked about me. They were just sharing their joys and, the hopes they had for themselves. And they were truly, in this very squalid place, happy. And I think if someone can be happy in a place like that, we can be happy anywhere. We can find peace anywhere. So, if you can just ponder that as I did, I thought, these people, at that point I was in graduate school at an Ivy League school, and I knew many people there that weren't happy, and yet these people that were collecting garbage in Egypt were much more happy and peaceful than most people that I knew. So that kind of set me on a path saying, well, what does make a person happy or peaceful? And another group I ran across over the years was children dying of cancer. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to meet a child dying of cancer. Now, not every child is this way, but many of them, if you ever get a chance, meet someone or talk to someone who's a child who's dying. And what you'll find is, in that situation, often they are like little angels. They're beautiful. They're not totally depressed and fearful of their death. And they're actually just angelic creatures, or angelic human beings, if I may say. I'd like to make a challenge to you, because I've given you a couple examples of people that I've met around the world that are happy, and yet most of us would not want to change places with them. And the challenge would be, talk to people in your community, people that you know that are suffering. Perhaps visit an oncology department, that's where people are dying of cancer, the children's pediatric ward, and visit these children, see what their lives are like. Are they miserable, depressed human beings, or are some of them, even in a dark place like this, still finding joy and peace? And the challenge is, if you can find them, then as I've said earlier, then science says then that's a possibility. No matter how much you're suffering, no matter what your circumstances are like right now, if you don't have a job, someone you know dear to you is dying, if you're dying, if you're physically suffering, you can still find happiness. But it's not easy. But if you work towards that goal with our help, Elizabeth and my help, and this show and all these guests we're bringing on and all the things that we're producing for you, I think you'll find that happiness can be found anywhere, anytime. So peace to you.
Our second question comes to us from Tina Q, who is from Jackson, Mississippi. And she writes in, I try really hard to manage my anxiety and stress, but sometimes it just gets the better of me. Deep down, I know that everything happens for a reason, but it's so hard sometimes to just let go and let things flow. Do you have any advice that will help me to do this and perhaps decrease some of my anxiety that arises when life throws me those bumps and waves?
Well, Tina, you already have half the question answered. Things do happen for a reason. And I think if you first, really believe that just helps, that's half the way there. And then the second thing is, life does throw us things, throws us things that we don't expect, even though we don't know it's happening. Often I use the analogy, we're an ant on this big, ball, and someone kicks it and it's shaking, it's really going vibrantly well. We don't know why it's doing that. It may have a reason the ball's being kicked, so it's going to go somewhere and we need to travel there with that ball, but we don't know when it's happening, what's happening. So what I often describe that really helps people is when life starts shaking and gets intense, you roll with it. I did martial arts years ago when I was in graduate school, and one of the things they taught us is that when someone hits you, don't get tense. Just flow with it, flow back with it. I used to do this rolling thing where I jump over these blocks that were like this, and I jump over them, but then the way I never got injured, I would just roll right into them, very relaxed, very comfortable. And you see that with professional athletes too. It's interesting. Athletes that have the least injuries, when they get hurt, they roll with things. Again, alcoholics, when they're in an accident, why do they often walk away? Because they're relaxed. And I think in life, when life throws something at you, you don't criticize yourself for being upset. You just say, I am gonna believe that ultimately there's a purpose for this, as you said, and I'm gonna work towards just relaxing and perhaps not even thinking about it. As we often talk about on the show, you can really only focus at one thing at a time. So if you focus on something wonderful happening in your life, or just something that's beautiful, your worry is going to be put to the side, don't you think?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And an important aspect is we talk a lot about how to handle stress, and this is a stressful thing that happens sometimes. And I myself, I struggle sometimes with this, but I work on it, and I, continue to work on it. And one of the things that helps me is taking a deep breath, like breathing. Maybe I have to take 5 deep breaths to cope with what's going on. And, there is a prayer, if you will, or just a saying that helps me tremendously. And it is, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Now, regardless of what religion you're from or what background, you could change the who you're talking to in that. But I think there's a very positive message there, and that it's, I can only take one thing at a time, and I can only control certain things, and just let me accept what is going on and be able to handle this. And I think that is really huge. Exercising, all the things that we've talked about before, those are the things that will help get you through. And don't follow that thought and that worry, because so many of the things that we worry about, they really don't even happen, especially the way that we think they're going to happen. And even if they do, how much control do we have over it? So sometimes you just have to breathe and let go and know that it's going to work out. You do your best to work things through, but you just got to let go, and you have to trust that life, there's going to be bumps, but there's also going to be good times too. So just hang on, and you're going to make it through whatever's going on.
And one last thing too is, again, the holism it really helps when you see life holistically. So even if one segment of your life is really not doing well right now, if a lot of it is doing great, you say, well, not everything's doing great. I'll work on that area, but lots of things in my life are doing well. I'm in a good relationship, I have great kids, I really love, my friends. If you remember those things, it really helps balance what's not working. So remember the beautiful things and be present with them, and we wish you the best.
Thank you for your question. This week's quote is from John F. Kennedy, and he said, "As we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them." And I think what he's getting at there is that your words are important, but what matters even more is your actions. Thank you for watching the Holistic Success Show. And don't forget, we can't do it without you. So please write to us with your questions. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our website so you can keep updated as to what we've got going on and all the wonderful shows we've got coming your way.
And we would love to have you visit our bookstore, which has books, CDs, DVDs for you, so you can grow with the mind and the body and the spirit and be holistically successful.
Please visit us at www.theholisticsuccessshow.com. Thank you.